Today's video, we're going to talk about something so nefarious, something so evil, something so wicked that it's going to leave you guys in utter disbelief. Today on the Nick Java podcast, we are talking about MK Ultra.
I was given a glass of Kool-Aid, and so were the other children. This Kool-Aid was spiked with LSD. It was horrible.
In the early days of the Cold War, the CIA ordered the creation of a secret program intended to find ways of mind control. They funded an army of psychiatric institutions across the United States and Canada to perform experiments on unsuspecting patients using psychedelic drugs, sensory deprivation, electroshock treatment, and more. The program was known by its codename, MK Ultra. At the end of the Korean War, a number of freed American POWs came home seemingly brainwashed and espousing communist propaganda. American officials suspected that the soldiers had been subjected to what they thought were new communist mind control techniques. Alarmed by the situation, the newly formed CIA allocated $25 million for psychiatric experiments on human beings.
It was the most secret program ever conducted by the CIA in the United States. Patients at psychiatric hospitals, prisoners in federal institutions, and even people in the public were given drugs without their awareness or consent and experimented upon.
Initial projects within MK Ultra included Operation Midnight Climax.
They established what were called safe houses, where prostitutes would lure men to these apartments. And then once the men were in the apartments, they were dosed with LSD. And then they were basically studied by CIA scientists, usually behind a two-way mirror.
Another common practice was the hosting and observing of LSD-induced parties with live music. These parties were called acid tests, and the culture that grew out of them played a key role in the development of the hippie and psychedelic movements a few years later. However, some of the most damaging experiments occurred at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, Canada. There, under the direction of infamous Scottish-American psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron, unsuspecting patients, many of whom had common ailments such as postpartum depression, were experimented on with aggressive drug cocktails and extreme techniques.
My father was a victim of Dr. Cameron. He was a 27-year-old, healthy skier, canoeer, very athletic, and he had asthma. They told him if he went to the Allen Memorial, they could cure his asthma.
My father, Charles, was a patient of Dr. Cameron's. He had a trigeminal neuralgia, it's called, where there's a pain in the temple that radiates into the jaw that apparently is excruciatingly painful. They told him that it was psychosomatic, which it's not, but in those days, what did they know? So they sent him to a shrink. This shrink that he went to was working with Cameron, although we didn't know. So he put my father right into the program.
I was having trouble with my parents. My father and my stepmother decided to put me in the Allen Memorial Institute. They had no idea what went on in there. I was 16 when I was there.
Dr. Cameron pursued a concept he called depatterning, which was meant to reduce patients to an infantile psychological state wherein doctors could take advantage of the person's cognitive vulnerability to attempt to rebuild their mind under the doctor's control. A popular method of choice to achieve this was called psychic driving.
The day that my father was brought to the hospital, they immediately put him on insulin to put him into like an insulin coma. They took clips from the interview with the shrink and put it on tape to run a loop under his pillow while he was put into this sleep treatment.
He also was put in an insulin coma for 36 days with a recording beside him saying that your mother hates you over and over and over and over and over.
That was beside my bed constantly, repeated 250,000 and 500,000 times.
Another common method was the use of extreme Page-Russell electroshock therapy.
Page-Russell shock treatment is approximately 40 to 75 times the strength of a normal shock treatment. So it's really designed to wipe out the memory.
He received 54 high voltage shock treatments, followed by 54 grand mal seizures.
After 27 days of this, they said that They were discouraged because he still had ties to his former life, in that he was asking to see his wife. They decided to give him more Page Russell shock treatments and put him to sleep for another 30 days.
When patients were released from the Ellen Memorial, they and their families' lives would never be the same again.
Well, there's a lot I could not remember after I got out of the Allen. When my family came, I was a zombie. I didn't even know who they were.
He never came out the same. He had a blank look in his eye. He didn't know who we were. He didn't know we were his daughters. He lost his job. We went into poverty after he came out.
He had said in his interview with the shrink that I was the apple of his eye. And after he came home, he started beating me not long after.
In 1973, the MKUltra program was terminated, and some of the evidence of its activities was systematically erased.
The whole thing was basically discovered because of a whistleblower named John Marks, who wrote the first book really about the program called The Search for the Manchurian Candidate. There were congressional hearings here in the United States in the mid-70s after it had been exposed. And during those hearings, the CIA finally admitted that this program existed. They admitted that it was probably not the right thing to do, but they feigned innocence.
Despite the congressional hearings and marginal interest in the subject in popular culture, most MKUltra survivors suffered in silence, taking their trauma with them to the grave. Today, having received no formal apology or compensation, the children of some survivors are pursuing a class action lawsuit against the institutions they deem responsible.
The CIA knew that it was breaking, every moral, ethical, and legal law in the books to do these experiments.
They all were behind it. They all knew what they were doing, but they weren't doing it out of care or love. They were doing it out of military and political reasons.
I am on medication now because of what happened to me when I was 16. I have not had any compensation or apology. I want everyone to know in Canada what went on in that horrible, horrible hospital.
MKUltra ran from 1953 to 1973 in the United States. So you had the CIA actually experimenting on American citizens without their consent. MKUltra was actually preceded by what was called Project Artichoke, which we'll get into that in another video. In 1943, LSD was created by Albert Hofmann in Switzerland. LSD was a primary drug that officials in MKUltra gave to unsuspecting victims of their research. In 1973, caused by Watergate, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MKUltra files destroyed. One of the most famous victims of the MKUltra experiments was the Unibomber Ted Kaczynski. Before Ted was the Unibomber, he was a 16-year-old mathematics savant that actually went to Harvard, where he got experimented on by the CIA.
But can we talk about darkness a little bit? So
yeah.
Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was allegedly part of the MKUltra studies while at Harvard. Do you think this is true? Do you think it had an impact on him psychologically, intellectually, and so on?
I do think it's true, and I do think it had an impact. So we talked before about, are these drugs somehow or other producing a certain kind of drug experience, or do they bring out what's within?
Mm-hmm.
So we have this experience, on the one hand, Ken Kesey, and he sort of took positive things out of this. On the other hand, we can get this opposition to the modern world, to technology, and to the point of creating bombs to try to go after it. So that the experience is not in the drug. It's this interaction between the drug, the person, the context. And so we can heal people with psychedelics, or people can be driven crazy with psychedelics. It depends, again, on the context.
Ted Kaczynski, the anarchist and so-called Unabomber who died in a federal prison medical facility on Saturday, transformed from boy genius to terrorist, going from a star mathematics student to a feared assailant who targeted academics, scientists, and industrialized society as a whole. Ted Kaczynski entered Harvard University as a 16-year-old on scholarship after skipping the 6th and 11th grades. It was there that he was a subject to an experiment run by Harvard psychologist Henry A. Murray that was backed by the Central Intelligence Agency. Though he graduated with a mathematics degree, later completing a doctorate in the field before becoming a professor, questions remain over whether or to what extent he was affected by the experiment, which reportedly involved mock interrogations in which participants' beliefs were harshly disparaged. Murray's study was widely reported to be a part of the CIA's program code named MK-Ultra, inspired by the use of mind control techniques on U.S. prisoners of war in Korea by the Soviet Union, China, and North Korea. The program sought to understand how to control a subject's mind, sometimes using substances such as LSD, according to a document the CIA made publicly available in 2018. The project attempted to produce a perfect truth drug for use in interrogating suspected Soviet spies during the Cold War, the document says, and generally to explore any other possibilities of mind control. Guys, what do you think about MK Ultra? You guys enjoy content like this? Let me know. I'll be glad to do more videos like this. What you guys thought about this? Would the Unabomber become the Unabomber if the CIA had not had a part in actually doing these kind of tests on Ted Kaczynski amongst other people as well? You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Hope you guys have a great day. You watch it On Air with Nick Driver, the Nick Driver podcast. Take care.